Okay, hello Bio 2. We're continuing with Section 1, Specialized Tissues and Plants. And we got to our first tissue, the dermal tissue. That, remember, is the tissue that lies on the outside of the plant. It's like the skin of the plant, and it makes up a couple specialized structures like trichomes and root hair cells and some guard cells. So we're going to get on to our next type. And our next type is called vascular tissue. This all should be very familiar to you because we mentioned it multiple times in our last chapter. And vascular tissue forms a transport system that moves water and nutrients throughout the plant. And the vascular tissue is made up of xylem, a water-conducting tissue, and phloem, a food-conducting tissue. So that should all be review from last time. So we're going to get in. We just kind of mentioned what they did, like the xylem and phloem in the last chapter, so we're going to get more in depth about how they're actually made up in this chapter. So what specialized cells make up vascular tissue? So it contains several types of cells. Xylem consists of tracheids and vessel elements. So xylem consists of two types of cells known as tracheids and vessel elements, and phloem consists of sieve tube elements and companion cells. So those are two main differences there. The tracheids and vessel elements, while phloem is sieve tube elements and companion cells. If we took a cross section, this is kind of what it would look like. We're going to get a more in-depth look at each one of those. And xylem. Okay, so breaking it down, so all seed plants have tracheids inside theirs that make up the xylem, and they are long, narrow cells that are impermeable to water, and impermeable means simply that they cannot pass. So that's just your vocabulary word for the day, impermeable, and they are pierced by openings that connect neighboring cells to one another. So I think we mentioned that they are stacked on top of each other, one on top of the other, just like tubes. So on the right you can see the more narrow one are the tracheids, so that's what the water is going to pass through. And that is found in all seed plants, so gymnosperms and angiosperms. And then angiosperms also have vessel elements, and vessel elements form a continuous tube through which water can move. So this part on our left here, the bigger opening, is found only in angiosperms. So angiosperms have tracheids and vessel elements, gymnosperms only have tracheids. So breaking down, so those are two parts of our xylem. So now we're going to look at the two different parts of the phloem. It consists of sieve tube elements and companion cells. Sieve tube elements are phloem cells joined end to end to form sieve tubes. So they form basically the exact same structure. They have some weird names, I know, but they do the exact same thing as the tracheids inside of the xylem. They're just going to stack end to end so things can form, so things can pass through. They're forming tubes. And the reason why they have to give them these names is just because they're found in different parts of the plant and they do different functions. But in essence, they're really the same thing. So don't get hung up on the names. Just know that they are joined end to end to form sieve tubes, and tube would be just for something to pass through. And the end walls of sieve tube elements have many small holes, since sugars and other foods can move through these holes from one adjacent cell to another. So adjacent just means next to one another, and so they have all these little holes so sugars and other foods can pass through easily. Because again, it's not going to be as simple to move these because it's not going to be they're kind of bigger than what water would be, so they have to be able to pass through things. So that is what the holes are for. And going down to our next one. So that was our sieve tube, and now companion cells are phloem cells that surround the sieve tube elements. And companion cells support the phloem, support the phloem cells and aid in the movement of substances in and out of the phloem. So here's our two functions of companion cells right here. They support the phloem cells and they aid in the movement of substances in and out of the phloem. And so that is our vascular tissue. Again, maybe try to make a little chart here. Might do that in class to help us keep the phloem separate from the xylem to figure out what actually makes up what. And our last type of tissue is called ground tissue, and these are cells that lie between the dermal and vascular tissues. So if you're not dermal, if you're not vascular, you're going to be ground, and ground is almost just like the filler. And they have three types of ground tissue. They're kind of a mouthful, so bear with me. They're parenchyma, cholenchyma, and sclerenchyma is how I'm going to pronounce those, and we'll go over those in class. So parenchyma cells have thin walls and they have large central vacuoles surrounded by a thin layer of cytoplasm. Cholenchyma cells have strong, flexible cell walls that support larger plants, and sclerenchyma cells have extremely thick, rigid cell walls that make ground tissue tough and strong. So basically just probably going off more of like a woody plant would probably have more sclerenchyma, whereas maybe our grasses might have more parenchyma. Again, the names are a mouthful, but we'll fight through them together, I guess. So just know that these are 3 types of ground tissue. Again, the individual cells just have different function for performing out, or for maybe carrying out different functions and supporting larger plants. So that is it for our tissue. We're going to have a couple more just about how plants can grow. And actually maybe they add in one, they call this a tissue. So we'll talk about the plant growth and meristematic tissue. So meristematic, again, we have some long words here, but we'll try to break it down to what they need and to what they mean. In most plants, new cells are produced at the tips of the roots and stems, and these cells are produced inside what are called meristems. So a meristem is simply an area where a plant makes new cells, and they're usually at the tips of roots and stems. So meristem is at the tip of roots and stems, and it is a cluster of tissue that is responsible for continuing growth throughout a plant's lifetime. So meristem is just the tip, and it's going to give us our new cells. And the new cells produced in meristematic tissue are undifferentiated, meaning they don't have a function, and as the cells develop into mature cells, they differentiate, and differentiate is the process of which cells become specialized in structure, and as the cells differentiate, they produce dermal, ground, and vascular tissue. So our meristematic tissue is going to give rise to all other tissue. And near the tip of each growing stem and root is an apical meristem. So if we think of apical, think of the apex, maybe like the top of something. An apical meristem is a group of undifferentiated cells that divide to produce increased length of roots and stems. And then we're going to look at how does meristematic tissue different from the rest of the plant tissue. Just the last one. It is the only plant tissue that produces new cells by mitosis. So just remember, meristem is different because it uses the process of mitosis, and it's going to be the one that gives rise to all the other ones. It's undifferentiated. So I know there's a lot of complicated words there, so if you have any questions, write them down and let me know.